Welcome back to Sikkim365.com. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhoefer. Today, here with Ashley Hodge to discuss another member of the Baylor men's basketball team. Today, we're talking about Rice center Kaden Pal, the local product out of Midway High School. Made the move from Rice to Baylor this offseason. 6'10", averaged 10.5 points, 7.2 rebounds this past season at Rice, and was another nice addition for Baylor to go alongside Jocelyn Bodo to give them a very dynamic center group and clear upgrades from what they were playing with at center a year ago.
Yep. It seems to be a theme that we've talked about, guys. There are some guys in college basketball, you are what you are. As a freshman, you don't improve much as a sophomore and a junior. But we've talked about multiple guys now that have shown massive improvements through their college years. J.J. White is one. Michael Ratai is another. Caden Powell is another one of those guys. I mean, he came from Midway. He was not highly recruited. He spent a couple years at Wyoming. No overlap with Obi Agbem. But then he went to Rice and had his best year last year. Really good offensive rating, 120 offensive rating. He's highly ranked nationally in a lot of key categories that you love to see as a big guy. Field goal percentage, top 500. Free throw rate, top 50 in the country and getting to the free throw line. Gets there a lot, shoots it pretty well once he gets there. 65%. You like to see him get that in the 70s, but that's sufficient. He blocks shots. He's a top 225 in shot blocking. He doesn't turn it over. You love that. He's a really good offensive rebounder, top 50 in the country. He's a good defensive rebounder, top 350 in the country. A very efficient player. I think he's going to be a two-headed monster with Jocelyn Bodo. And I love the fact that he's, a highly intelligent kid. I think he told me he's an engineering major. And I believe he told me his wingspan was 7'4", if I'm not mistaken. So another long guy. And you're going to get, rim protection. You're going to get a longer wingspan. Should be a part of a great two-headed monster for Baylor at the post position. Excited to see what they can do. Last year was a struggle with guys under 6'7" on the roster. We didn't have many. We only had one that played a lot, and that was Josh Ojawuna, and then Josh got hurt. So, then it was up to Norchad and Jalen Celestine to do the work down low. And they just had, some size issues with a lot of players. But this year, that shouldn't be an issue. Baylor's got a lot of quality size, and Kaden Powell is going to be a big part of that.
They've certainly addressed that. And even the guys who maybe are below 6'7", they all have long wingspans or are
right.
good rebounders. When you look at Tunde or Skillings. So they all kind of complement each other very well to go along with their bigs, with Powell, Ratai, and of course, Bodo, all being 6'9" or taller with great wingspans. But I think for Powell, it's very interesting because you look at Bodo, and you see an elite defense player with some good traits on offense. And then you look at Caden Pal, and it's a good offensive player with some good traits on the defensive side. So they kind of complement each other well. And you can also play them without feeling like you're either A, not going to be able to score the basketball, or B, you're going to be hemorrhaging points in the paint, because they both are pretty good on both those ends. They're pretty okay on the end that they're, maybe a little bit deficient in. And so I think with Powell, the biggest thing that I like about him is he scores in the paint pretty well. He rebounds pretty well, offensive rebounding wise. His rate was ahead of Josh O. And then I do think there is a little bit of upside that you could actually feed him a little bit in the post. And the biggest thing for me, though, is I think he's going to be able to hunt switches. Like if you put a little guy on him in a switch off a pick and roll, I think that's where he will be feasting. And whether it's on the offensive glass or if you get it to him in the post, I think that's where he's going to be very impactful. I don't know that he's going to be just straight up feed him in the post against another 6'10" defender. I don't know that you're going to be able to do that efficiently often, but I do think in some matchups he's going to, be really good and be really effective, just feeding him in the post and giving Baylor an option to score points in the paint.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love the fact when I interviewed him, we talked about why he was so good at getting to the free throw line. And he said, I use a lot of pump fakes. I use a lot of counters. And I also know when to, put my shoulder into guys. And and knock them off balance, get them out of position. He's a very smart, crafty player. Very, very good compliment. I love the 1-2 punch. He's not an above the rim player. Jocelyn Bodo is, and Baylor's got a lot of the above the rim guys. Dan Skillings Jr. and Tunde Yesufu. You expect to be Cam Carr's got some bounce as well. Caden Powell's probably not going to be one of those guys that's going to be posterizing guys on the regular, but he certainly is a guy that's going to get, to the foul line, get some cheap points, uses strength, uses positioning to really do effective work. And again, I mean, all you can ask is, guys get better every year. And if that trend continues for a lot of these guys, then Baylor's going to get the very best of their college years, and that would be exciting if all of them continue the upward trend of their improvement each year.
And I feel like his touch is pretty good. So even in kind of short rolls, when he catches it in the middle of the paint, I do think that there's some touch that you can kind of count on him to finish those, or maybe get to the free throw line, or take a power dribble and finish off the glass. Some things along those lines, catching it in the middle of the paint. I think the areas that I'm a little just kind of iffy on, right, are, how's he going to hold up if he has to switch? Are you going to be able to switch him? I don't know that his feet are quite quick enough to be able to deal with that regularly. I think he'll potentially be better than what Baylor was dealing with last year. I think it'll be maybe similar to Josh O, but that's something I'm definitely thinking about. And then the other part is the above the rim stuff, and that's defensively and offensively. You get away with it because you're playing at the G5 level at Rice, but when you come to the Big 12, is the athleticism going to be enough that it still is impactful, even in a league like the Big 12? Those are just some of my questions, concerns, or the weaknesses, I would say, that are kind of in his game.
Yeah. Well, according to Ken Pom, we talked about JJ White. His numbers trailed once he saw better competition. Caden Powell's numbers actually went up with better competition against A and B competition. There were 6 games last year, and he had a 123 offensive rating versus 120 for the full season. So he did play good against better competition, better athletes. But that's always a question mark when you're taking a step up in level. Again, like JJ White, we'll know a lot in Germany. We'll see how he plays against some of the better athletes around the world at the World University Games. But smart player, crafty player. I think he'll get the job done. Good pick setter. I noticed that. I watched one of his games on tape, and I really like the fact that he sets hard picks. Doesn't seem to be get called for bad fouls, and does a really good job of using his body effectively. That's what you want from a big guy. I will say Josh Ojewuna, I thought, was one of the better defenders on the perimeter, and I mean, if he's anywhere near what Josh was from a perimeter defender, I'll be extremely happy. But if he can protect the rim and just put himself in good positions with his intelligence and play good team defense, that is a concern, because we look at this team on paper, we think, hey, they should be better defensively. They got a lot of switchability. They got good athletes. I think we're going to be a major upgrade from last year in those areas. But you are throwing together a whole new team, and sometimes the best defensive teams are just people that have played together 3 or 4 years and really understand where each other's going to be. So you're going to have to learn these things quick and really communicate well, and that's going to be a challenge. But it's not a challenge unique to Baylor. A lot of schools are facing that same dilemma as the roster turnovers higher than it's ever been in college basketball.
Right. The connectedness is definitely something that you're going to have to probably, kind of weather the storm a little bit potentially early in the season. But I think they have the pieces and the, seniority, really, the experience to kind of make that work. Powell is one of those guys that I also kind of, when I look at Iowa State last year, they brought in multiple bigs and just kind of said, we're going to make it work. We're just going to figure it out, and we're going to play these guys a lot and have the depth. And then you would see late in games, their third center would come in the game, and he ends up with 8 points, 8 rebounds, playing against starters who are tired and exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think that's another area that Pal and Bodo should be able to feast, is the fact that they're not going to have to play, 35 minutes or, crazy amount of minutes. Like, they're going to be able to rotate a lot. And I think you're going to be able to feature the hot hand or feature who's working for that game more. And I think that's where Powell could also see a very nice advantage going up against either a backup big or going up against a tired starter. I think there's a lot of positives to having that.
That's a really good point. The Iowa State comparison may be a great comparison because, as you were saying this, I'm thinking about Jefferson and what a great year he had for Iowa State. But probably a lot of that was due to his big guys keeping him fresh and not wearing him down, because you got guys doing the dirty work. So Michael Ratai could be a major beneficiary of Pal and Bodo, being able to do that dirty work inside and keep, a more natural scorer like Ratai, or even, Skillings or Tunde or Cam Carr, when you're not having to play them out of position and you're able to put, big guys on other teams' big guys and not wear those guys down, then it keeps them fresher on the offensive end. So excellent point. The Iowa State comparison is a good one, I think. And Baylor's, certainly adjusted their roster to be more that than the top heavy roster they had last year. They thought you'd have a great big three with Edgecombe, O'Meara, and Roach. Two of those three performed really well, but of course we know Roach was a bit of a disappointment from expectations. But this year it's much more balanced.
It is much more depth this year, and Caden Powell definitely adds to that for this year's team. We'll be back next week. We will talk more about this men's basketball roster as we dive into more of the depth that this Baylor staff has brought in for the men's basketball team heading in to next season. But that is it for today. Thanks for listening on SicEm365.com.